Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really setting out on a journey that challenges, well, pretty much everything we think we know about church and faith communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're diving deep into this fascinating mix of sources, discussion questions, reflective bits, and practical steps from a model they call Koinos, faith without walls. And our mission for you today is really to pull out those core insights, those moments that make you go, aha. Maybe some surprising facts, and definitely those concrete takeaways. Things that show how communities can build real connection and purpose, maybe even without the usual buildings and budgets.
And what's really striking, I think, is how these sources just immediately challenge your assumptions, your kind of default settings for what a spiritual community has to look like.
Right.
They get you thinking about, well, how could faith actually thrive without relying on the conventional stuff? Like no walls, maybe no big budget, maybe not even formal titles. It's about getting back to the essence, isn't it?
Back to the essence. I like that. Okay, so let's unpack this because they really kick things off with some paradigm-shifting questions designed to make you stop and think.
Definitely.
The first big theme seems to be disrupting those conventional models. Imagine being asked this straight up. What if the very structure of your church is the biggest obstacle to genuine discipleship?
Oof. Yeah, oof is right. That hits hard. And it brings up this really fundamental question, doesn't it? Are we maybe clinging to a model that Jesus never actually asked us to build in the first place? The questions in these sources, they push you to consider if we've somehow swapped, performance for presence, or if the whole institutional vibe has kind of trained people just to watch, to be spectators instead of actually participating.
Like spiritual consumers.
Exactly. And it even questions how we measure health, suggesting, maybe controversially, that God's metrics are entirely different from our usual ones, like attendance or budget size.
And what's interesting is this isn't just about churches. As you're listening, think about any group you're in, maybe work, a club, volunteering.
Sure.
Are its structures actually helping it achieve its main goal? Or are they, maybe without anyone realizing it, kind of holding it back? It's a really universal idea here.
That's a great point. The principle applies way beyond just faith contexts.
So if we're going there, if we're challenging structures, then the next logical step is, okay, what does that mean for leadership, for connection, for how we even see ourselves?
Right.
And the sources dive right into that. Big focus on self-reflection and identity, and then moving into reclaiming relationships and community.
Yeah. And this part really invites you to look inward at your own leadership habits, your spiritual practices. They ask things like, where have you substituted busyness for intimacy, whether that's in ministry, worship, or just relationships?
That's a tough one.
It is. Or this one, which I find really, really provocative. What does church look like when no one is watching and nothing is planned? Just raw faith.
Wow. Yeah, when the program's gone, what's left? That really hits home, doesn't it?
It does.
And then from that personal look, it zooms back out to the community, asking things like, in what ways has your church substituted programs for people?
A classic trap.
And then this really radical idea. What would happen if you designed your church around relationships instead of routines? Just fill the whole model.
It's a complete inversion. And they offer tools for this, like the institutional drift audit. It sounds a bit corporate, but it's basically asking, is your main engagement driver relational connection or programmatic excellence?
Ooh, good distinction.
And are your health indicators people-centric or performance-based? It forces honesty. There's also something called the one another inventory, which basically gets you to rate how well those biblical one another commands, love one another, serve one another, be hospitable from Romans and 1 Peter. How well are they actually being lived out, not just talked about?
So it's practical. They suggest things like using a deep versus shallow community worksheet. Maybe even doing a Bible study focused just on those one another verses.
Yeah, making it concrete.
The core message seems crystal clear.
Yeah.
Relationships aren't just part of the deal. They have to be the absolute foundation, the cornerstone.
Couldn't agree more. That shift is fundamental.
And if relationships are the cornerstone, that naturally makes you rethink leadership, right? If it's all about connection, who leads and how.
Exactly.
The sources seem to propose a pretty radical redefinition here. Moving away from hierarchy towards shared influence, redefining leadership and authority is the theme.
Yeah, and what's really striking is this idea of leadership being relational, not positional.
Yeah.
That's a huge shift in mindset. It then asks, what does that demand of you personally?
Hmm.
It pushes you to look at where you might be tempted to, say, control rather than cultivate, or maybe delegate rather than disciple, handing off tasks versus actually investing in people.
Big difference there.
And this question really gets to the heart of it. What fears come up when you imagine releasing control or decentralizing leadership? Because, let's be honest, fear is often the biggest barrier.
Oh, absolutely. That fear of losing control, it's so real for so many leaders, isn't it?
It is.
And the sources push even harder, asking if a community without titles can actually function in good spiritual order.
Yeah.
It makes you question if your current model truly reflects Christ's servanthood, or if it maybe accidentally undermines it.
And to help think that through, there's this section, Every Member a Minister, with an exercise called Authority versus Influence.
Okay.
It gets you thinking about times leadership happened effectively without a title, and importantly, what gifts or leadership potential might be getting squashed, by a rigid hierarchy, recognizing what's already there.
So practically it's saying stop just finding jobs for available people. Instead, figure out people's actual spiritual gifts and give them responsibilities that align with those gifts.
Yes, empowering based on gifting, not just availability.
The goal being this long-term legacy of servant leadership, really living out that shared community idea. They even have a legacy mapping exercise for that. It's about empowering everyone to contribute meaningfully.
That's the core of it, shared ministry.
Okay, this next concept is really fascinating. Multiplication instead of just expansion. What does that actually mean? Are we just talking about splitting groups, or is it something deeper, more intentional about how communities reproduce?
That's a great question. And the sources frame it within this bigger idea of mission, multiplication, and movement. They ask some really sharp questions here, like, are you building a brand or birthing a movement?
Wow, that's a contrast.
It is. And this one, what would change if you designed every gathering with the intent to multiply? Not just grow, but multiply. That shifts everything.
So it's about developing leaders who are genuinely ready to be sent, not just kept busy serving internally.
Exactly. It's sent out to start new things. The idea is to design communities that are inherently reproducible, built for outward movement from the get-go.
And how do they suggest doing that?
Well, a key concept is being small by design. They even have a multiplication readiness test. It makes you think through scenarios like, okay, what if our group had to split tomorrow? Who could lead the new group?
Practical test.
And it forces you to confront your assumptions about growth. Like, do we automatically think bigger is better? Does size equal success? It really challenges those common metrics.
So how do you make that happen practically?
Well, one suggestion is to draft a 2-year multiplication map with your leaders, both current and potential ones.
Okay, like a roadmap.
Exactly. And you set clear readiness indicator signs that show when a group is actually healthy enough and ready to multiply. This ties into another tool, the mission and multiplication map.
What does that do?
It helps you plan out specific things. Seed moments, which are like the initial sparks for new communities, multiplication markers, the milestones showing you're on track, and spirit-empowered goals. It provides a tangible framework.
Got it. So it's very intentional, very planned, but focused on organic reproduction, not just getting bigger.
Precisely. It's a different way of thinking about growth altogether.
Okay, so we've talked philosophy, vision, the why. But let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually do this stuff day to day? How do you cultivate this faith without walls community, especially when, you hit roadblocks or resistance?
Right. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. And the sources are surprisingly practical here. They offer this comprehensive system, the book-wide to-do list exercise system. Sounds a bit formal, but it's designed for clarity and, crucially, sustainability.
Okay, a system. What does it involve?
It starts with capture and clarify. They suggest using something called a Koinos mind dump, not just a random brainstorm, but really listing out every open question, challenge, idea related to the community.
Getting it all out.
Exactly. Then you sort it. Is this an immediate action, a future project, something needing input? Then you move to task clarification. This is key. Turning vague thoughts like need to talk about leadership into concrete verb-first actions like email Sarah to schedule a meeting on shared leadership. Specific. Actionable.
Makes sense. Vague ideas stay vague.
Totally. Then you organize these tasks by context and priority. They suggest contextual task sorting. So you might have lists for when you're at your computer or when you need to make calls or time set aside for study.
So you tackle tasks based on where you are or what tools you have.
Right. And crucially, always prioritizing the actions that have the highest spiritual leverage. That means focusing on the things that will make the biggest positive difference to the community's health and mission.
I like that phrase, highest spiritual leverage. And how do you keep this system going?
Through a weekly Koinos review. This is non-negotiable. A dedicated hour, maybe 60 minutes each week. You review your tasks, reflect honestly on what worked or didn't, and this is vital. Reconnect with the why. Why are we doing this?
Keeps the purpose front and center.
Absolutely. And for daily focus, there's a simple exercise. One high leverage action. Just asking yourself, what one action today would most strengthen the health of our Koinos community? Keeps you focused on impact.
That's super practical. What about handling problems, like resistance?
Yeah, they tackle that head on under naming pitfalls and navigating resistance. They ask really probing questions like, what theological or emotional resistance do you feel when you hear no building, no budget, no pastor?
Getting those hidden fears out in the open.
Exactly, because those unspoken fears are often what hold leaders back from embracing simplicity. There's also a pitfall prevention plan tool.
What's that for?
It helps you identify early warning signs of drift, things like elitism creeping in, or maybe theological vagueness, or cliques forming, so you can address them before they become major issues.
Proactive, not reactive.
Right. And finally, to avoid burnout and stop things getting overly complex again, because that's always a risk, there's a simplicity sustainability plan.
Right.
It basically prompts you to identify non-essential things cluttering up community life and commit to streamlining just one area each month. The whole point is to fiercely protect time for what really matters. Presence, prayer, and people.
Presence, prayer, and people. That keeps coming up.
It's the core. Everything else should serve that.
So this whole deep dive, it really feels like it's building toward something beyond just having a healthy internal community, right? It seems focused on outward impact, too.
Oh, definitely. The sources really push towards what they term missional imagination. This is where the vision explodes outwards.
Missional imagination. Tell me more.
Well, it involves asking these truly transformative questions, like, get this, how could your neighborhood be transformed by 5 families on mission instead of 1 Sunday service? It's just the whole scale, doesn't it?
Wow, yeah. 5 families versus 1 event. Different impact entirely.
Or this one, maybe even more challenging. If your church vanished tomorrow, would your city even notice? A real gut check.
Ouch. That's a tough one to sit with.
It is, and maybe the most hopeful, audacious question. Could the next great missions movement actually begin from your living room? It democratizes mission, takes it out of the institution.
It really challenges our assumptions about scale and resources.
Completely. And tied into this is the idea of cultural bridge building. It makes you consider what forms of church, maybe the space we use, the language, the format, what might we need to let go of to actually connect with people today? Especially those who feel burned or disillusioned by traditional church. How do we become relevant without compromising truth?
Meeting people where they actually are, not where we wish they were.
Exactly. And they offer practical tools here too, like the local mission ecosystem worksheet.
Sounds interesting.
It helps you map out who is actually in your local context, who are the unreached people or groups right around you, and then it guides you to design small, targeted micro-initiatives to reach those specific groups authentically.
So very localized, very specific actions.
Right. And finally, it all culminates in this idea of from living room to legacy. It's about envisioning the long-term impact. What kind of fruit do you hope your simple, relational, missional community leaves behind in, say, 10 years?
Thinking long-term.
Yeah. And how can your own table, meaning your home, your story, your unique influence, how can that be leveraged to reach the world, starting right where you are? It brings it back to the personal, but with a global vision.
This whole deep dive, it really has been a journey, hasn't it? From questioning the very foundations of how we typically do community.
Right back to the basics.
All the way to embracing this really vibrant picture of community that's relational, that multiplies naturally, and is deeply focused on mission.
Yeah.
We've seen how things like intentional self-reflection, rethinking leadership entirely, and using these practical systems can actually build genuine connection that lasts and makes a difference.
And I think the key thing to remember is that these sources, they aren't just theory. They're not just ideas to talk about. They feel like a direct invitation to actually do something, to change. They offer real tools, sharp questions, specific exercises, all designed to shift our assumptions, yes, but also to spark real-world changes in how we lead, how we gather, how we grow together.
It's very action-oriented.
Very much so.
So, as you're listening and reflecting on all this, maybe here's a thought to take away. What's one non-essential thing you could release this week?
Good question.
Maybe it's a meeting, a task, even just a worry you're holding on to. What could you let go of? Specifically to make more space for presence, for prayer, and for people. And just consider, how might that one simple act start a new rhythm, a more genuine connection for you or maybe even for your whole community?
That's a powerful place to start. One small change for deeper connection.